Right.
Tomatoes.
I'm thinking more like a little leftover captain in the personally produced, or? No.
Well, we'll get started. I'm sure people may be wandering in. We'll give them some time there. There are some handouts back in the corner there if you don't have a handout there. Our main topic today is why is my PC slow and how to optimize it and see what's going on. And that'll be given by myself, Tom Kreuzer. Before we get to the main topic, we'll cover some club. The MACSIG is meeting tomorrow, Friday, in the 201 auditorium. And so if you do have an iPad or an iPhone, it's beneficial to attend. And I would guess, I haven't heard, but I would guess their topic tomorrow is probably the new devices that were announced, the new iPhone and the Apple TV and some of the other devices that were just announced this month. Our next general meeting is Friday, October 20th, and we'll be back in the Baltic Room, and we'll talk about best software for tablets and smartphones. And so we've covered that topic in the past. I'll update it, and if you have any suggestions for favorites that you use or ones that really work for you, you can send me an email or talk to me, and I'll be sure and include it on our demo there. Then in November, our November general meeting, we do have our holiday gift ideas, and that'll be our pizza lunch with pop served. And you can see we're asking for help. The person who normally picks up our pop and ice for the meeting is going to be gone. So we're looking for somebody who's willing to do that. The club will reimburse for the pop and the cost there. It's just a matter of picking up the different types of pop and ice and bringing it to the meeting there. And if you can help with that, you can see Stan just walked in there. You can see Stan or talk to me, and we'd love to get you involved there. Our officers, our president is Jim Holman over there. Linda Brown is our vice president. Paul Ebert is our membership secretary. And I don't see Paul. Paul leaves for South Africa. He's the one who was doing the pop there. He's going to be gone for a while. Mike Griffin is our treasurer and MACSIG. Stan Miller, back in the corner there, is our secretary. Andrew Pertusi is our communication coordinator. And my name is Tom Kreuzer. I'm a director at large. Members old and new, you can pay your dues. The dues are $8. And just a reminder, if you're changing your email, make sure and notify us. There's handouts back in the corner if you want to pick one up. Notify us, so that's the way that we keep in touch. I mentioned that Paul, our membership secretary, is going to be gone there. He's going to be out of the country from September 25th to December 13th. So if you do want to pay your dues, you can still pay them to myself, and we'll get it updated and get stuff done. But there won't be any notices going out and some other things during this period. Suggestions for topics, you can email your ideas to myself or any of the board members. We're always looking for people to volunteer to present on hardware and software you use at work. And if you're willing to write a long or short article, we're always looking for that too. Or there's Paul. He hasn't quite left for South Africa there. There are handouts back in the corner there. If you didn't get a handout, if people could pass it to some of the people that just came in. Our website, we post our slides. So if you miss any of the meetings or want to go back to a previous one, you can go out there and you can get that. We usually try and record the meetings, so that a link to that is also out there. We have our deals section, our eBytes newsletter. that has tips and hints and questions. And if you have anything for that, you can send that to myself. And we list the website. Otherwise, it's also listed on the back here. Any club questions before we get to the main topic?
Sorry I was late, but if you didn't reiterate. So I send notices, and I'm gone for a few months. Good for me. If I haven't sent you a notice, don't pay. It just causes confusion.
Well, so he'll be back in December there, middle of December, or for our...
Couple months next year.
Well, not exactly. I'm actually about 2 months ahead. So those, some of you astute people might notice that, like I made you pay for it. But I always advance your date 1 year, no matter when you pay. But yeah, the November people get a break.
Okay.
Don't get to come get that.
Yeah. Any questions there? Okay. We'll get started with our main topic. The main topic is going to be, why is my PC slow? This can be interactive, so if you have any questions or that, I can't fix your machine right now, but I can certainly demo some of the tools that we talk about and what's going on there. The tools that I list work for most versions of Windows, so they've been available on really all versions of Windows. The look has maybe changed a little bit from version to version, but if you have a Windows 7 or a Windows 8, you'll find these same tools that we talk about today are also in there. Now, you can spend money on software to optimize your machine or clean up or things like that. But you really don't have to. Windows already does come with a number of tools that help you both clean up and identify problems and optimize your machine. So with just a little bit of checking around on the machine, you'll find these tools and you'll be able to check and see what's going on. The first thing you should do to make sure that your machine is running as well as it can is to make sure that the operating system and all the programs and device drivers are up to date. And one of the things you can do there is you can make sure that the Windows Update is working. By default, it should have been turned on and it should be updating itself. And you can check that by going to the Windows setting and then using the update and security. Now, when I talk about all these tools and where you can find them and stuff like that, I'm just listing one way you can get at them. There's usually about 5 or 6 different ways, whether you go through the menu, whether there's speed keys, whether you're in File Manager and you right mouse click. There's usually about 5 different ways to get at all these different menus and all these different options. But I'll be just mentioning one way there. And so one of the ways to get to the Windows settings, if you aren't familiar, is yes, you can go down to the Start menu and go to Settings, but if you hit the Windows key, the little Windows button, and that brings up Windows Settings. And from the Windows Settings, here's an option called Update and Security. And if I click on that, this gives me information about the Windows Update. And so it'll tell you when the last time that it checked. So on this machine, the last time it checked was today at 8:24 a.m. If you want it to check, I can press this and it'll check right now to see if between that time and now if there's been any new updates there. No new updates there, but you can see it updated that. The other thing you can kind of look at here is if I go to Update History, it'll show you all the updates that have been installed over the past months there. So in this case, you can see the last update from Microsoft was on 9/12. And there was a couple of updates there, and the build number is listed there. And Microsoft has major updates about once every month. And occasionally we'll have a mid-month type of an update. But you'll see updates about once every month. Yes?
I checked my history and it said my updates failed. Any idea why that would be?
No, but if it says it failed, sometimes it'll have this as a link there. So you can click on the link and then it'll, in some cases, tell you the problem there. Because there should be an error code associated with any failure there. And as long as you can get to the error code or...
Your bottom one.
What's that?
Your bottom one.
Yeah. So there's an error code there, KB 4022716. If you Google that, that'll take you to the Microsoft help information, and it'll frequently explain it and then tell you the workaround if maybe there is some contention with some other program that has to be turned off in order for it to update drivers or things like that. But yeah. But you want to make sure that it is updating, and that way you are getting, because if you don't get the current versions, potentially you have security holes that other companies or that could exploit there, similar to the Equifax deal where they didn't update their server and there was security holes. So you do want these updates to be installed and everything kept up to date, both for security and for performance. And that's what I have there. If you want it to run best, make sure they're installed there. Most of the software today does come with automatic or manual updates. Not only Windows, but you take a package like a Chrome, let's say. Well, Chrome will automatically go out there and update itself. So they look to update and do that. And whether it's iTunes or almost anything, they come with automatic updates. So make sure that your software is getting updated with current versions there. If you purchase the software, let's say you purchased like Quicken, Quicken will also install updates. Even though you aren't buying a new copy of Quicken, it'll install security patches and updates there. But when they come out with a new year, a new version for the new year, you have to purchase that if you want that version. So if you're purchasing software, you kind of have to keep track of that on how long you want to go between purchasing a new version. Yes.
I have Quicken and have used Quicken for about 15 years. I would say that they almost always ask me if I want to update it.
Right. Now, if it's just a normal patch, I'd recommend updating that because they're usually fixing a problem there. Now, there's always the possibility that they'll create a new problem with the fix of the old, but most of the time it's not a problem. And if it truly is a problem, then the company usually has a way to back out or go back to the previous version if you do run into a problem where something isn't working right. I know I've had that with Quicken where some of their versions, they don't test as well as they used to. Quicken, if you're not familiar, has split off. And the company is going a different direction, and so some of the programmers that they used to have and the processes that they used to have for doing things are not as good as they used to be. But it's still a good product, and they still are updating it. Yes?
And with Quicken and other software, if you're careful about the wording, they usually say updates. That's okay. That's the patches and the fixes. It's an upgrade when they want to move you to the next version.
Right.
You know, at some point, Quicken will say, you can't use this anymore. You have to upgrade.
Yeah, Quicken is a package. I believe you can go 3 years. So 3 years without an update. After that, the if you want to do the automatic downloads of information from financial institutions and stuff like that, it will not let you do that. You have to upgrade to a newer version there. So Quicken is software. Personally, myself, I go 3 years and then upgrade, because the new features that they add year to year, to me, I really don't need, but I do need the ability to download the information from the financial institutions, and so I do upgrade, but it's only every 3rd year there. Okay. There are update programs and software out there, and what they'll do is they'll search through your programs and monitor to see, this is the version that you currently have, this is the version that you should be at. So there are software there, and in the past I recommended a program called Sakuna Personal Software Inspector. It was a free program, and it would go through and list your software and list the software that was old or hadn't been updated. Unfortunately, Sakuna itself is no longer being updated, so it's not a package that you should use there. I haven't checked out, but I do list this link in here. There are 9 free programs that this site had listed that will do the same function of a Sakuna there. Go through and check your software and see if there's newer versions out there. Like we were talking about, I'm not a real big fan of this type of software anymore. It was needed years ago because the software didn't have automatic updates. Most of the software didn't have automatic updates built into it. Today, most of the software has automatic updates built into it. So the need for a program like this is certainly less than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago when most of the software didn't have it. But if you do want a program that will check and let you know if something is getting out of date, there's some options here that will do that. Okay, now let's talk about what's running on your PC. And this is where, if you're thinking that your machine is running slow or there's some kind of problem, some software that's slowing it down or that, this is where you can start your investigation. And the way you can start your investigation is you can do a Control-Alt-Delete and then click on Task Manager. And when it first comes up, there's not a lot of detail, so you have to click on a button called More Detail, and then you can select the Performance tab. And let's do that. So if I do a Control-Alt-Delete, you get the screen here. I select Task Manager. And let's maximize it here, and then I can click the Performance tab. And what this tab is going to show me is it shows me a ton of information about what's currently happening on this laptop here. It shows me, I have highlighted here the memory. Let me go back here. Let me just back up a second. When you first start it up, this is what Task Manager looks like. So you can see I clicked on the more details to show less detail. And so when you first open it up, all you're going to see is just a list of software that's currently running. So software that's currently running on this PC, Google Chrome is running, and Microsoft PowerPoint is running here. You have to click on the more details to see this, and then the performance. And then it'll show you, in this case, I have memory highlighted here. This will show you how much memory. So at this particular point, I'm using 46% of my memory, 3.6 gigabytes out of 7.9 gigabytes that I have on here. This is a nice little tool too, because in addition to showing you how much memory is being used, it'll show you the type of memory that you have, the number of slots that are being used, and that. So if I go down here, the speed of my memory is 2.133 megahertz. I'm using one of the 2 slots in my laptop, which is nice because if I did want to add more memory, I have an open slot that I could add more memory. And this is the type of memory. SODIMM is the type of memory that it is there. And this you can monitor to see if your machine is running out of memory, because if this number, this 46%, is starting to get up to 80% or 90%, what happens is the Windows operating system then has to take some of these programs that are in memory and write them out to the hard drive. And this writing out to the hard drive and reading from the hard drive can slow it down to about 10 times slower than if you have memory, if you have enough memory. So you do want to make sure if your machine is running slow that you aren't maxed out on your memory there. And if you have an older machine, you may only have 4 gigabytes of memory. Well, if I had 4 gigabytes of memory, I'd be almost out of memory here. So the easiest way to improve the performance for an older machine that is running out of memory is to buy new memory. Now, if you have 4 gigabytes of memory, and this tells you that you're using 2 of 2 slots, that means that you don't have an open slot. That means if you buy memory, you're going to have to buy completely new memory. So the 4 gigabytes that you have in there, unfortunately, you're going to be throwing that away. You're going to have to buy, let's say you want 8 gigabytes, you're going to have to buy 2 4 gigabyte SIMs and put those in. You can't just buy an additional 4 and plug it in because you have no place to plug it in.
Is swapping out the memory in a laptop pretty trivial?
It's pretty trivial. Usually it just involves one screw, and you don't even need you just push it down with your thumbs to the install, and to take it out, you just use your thumbs to take it out. And you can look on YouTube for directions or how to do it for particular models and that too. So it's
Crucial.com will tell you whether it's upgradable or not.
right. Crucial and some of the other sites will kind of tell you this information too. Once you plug in your model number of the hardware, it'll tell you how many slots, what type of memory, and things like that. But because there are different types of memory, and you do want to have the right speed. If you put in a slower speed, it can either not work or run slower than what you had. So you don't want to end up with something worse than what you had before. But memory is a good thing to upgrade, and that's usually what's causing the majority of people's problems when they start saying they have a slow machine. Is they may only have 4 gigabytes or 6 gigabytes, and they've got all this software loaded on their machine, and so their machine is just running out of memory. Yes.
Just to reiterate for just a second, I'm on the same screen that you are on here, and that says that I have an extra slot. So if I take the back off, I can put another memory device in. However, just wondering, do I go to Crucial.com, like has been recommended, in order to figure out which memory I need?
The sites will help you figure out what memory. This also tells you what memory. Where you decide to buy the memory from, that's kind of up to you. You can buy memory at Best Buy, but buying it on an eBay and Amazon from Crucial, you're going to see is maybe half the cost of what Best Buy is. So most people will buy their memory online rather than go into the store. The stores are willing to sell it, but
that's what I want to do.
And they're willing to install it too. It's just they're going to charge you for installing.
Yeah, it depends on if you've got a contract with them or not, whether they'll install it for you or not. But you go Crucial, Kingston, or PNY, and they'll all tell you. They all have the same tool that tells you what's available and if you can upgrade and what you need to buy and what the maximum is. You may only be able to go from 4 to 8 instead of the 16. But the system may not be usable for that. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions about memory? In addition to memory here, you can check things like the CPU and see what's going on there. So this will tell you your CPU activity and show you if you're maxing out on that. Again, the detail down here will show you the speed there, the cores, which is the number of processors itself. So in this case, this machine has 2 processors, but then it breaks it out into 4 logical processors. So there's 4 logical processors when it divvies up work and is trying to do things. So it gives you some of that information there and shows you what's kind of going on there. And again, if you're having trouble with something where it is maxing out on the CPU, you can go in and we'll show you how to dig deeper into some of these things too. Same is true for the disk. So the disk is showing, in this case, it's saying disk 0, which is my C and D drive. The C and D drive on this machine, the C drive is where my programs and my data are. The D drive is what HP set up on this machine as Windows. So this has the Windows install. So if there's ever a problem with this machine, I can go out to the D drive, I can reinstall Windows from the D drive there. D is not an area for me to save files to or anything like that. It's just strictly an area. Instead of sending a CD with Windows on it, HP puts it out there, and most vendors will put out this separate drive out there because they don't, this machine doesn't even have a DVD drive. So if I want to install something, it's best if I have it on the hard drive. Okay. If you're connected by Ethernet, your network will show here how much if you're doing stuff. So let's go back here. Let's do this. There's options up here where I can say always on top. I can minimize it. I can do stuff there. But I'm going to put it always on top here, and let me go and let's pull up something. Let's go. We'll just type in anything in here, and I'll hit enter, and you can see what it did there. I get spikes. My Wi-Fi here, you can see when I did stuff in Chrome there, it spiked up there because it was going out to the network, and it maxed out the throughput on the network for those few seconds, fractions of a second there. But again, you can look at this stuff and you can see where is your problem? What's slowing it down? Is it the disk? Is it the CPU? Is it the memory? Is it your Ethernet connection? So if you have a very slow internet connection, this will help you figure out that you've got a slow internet connection. So it's worthwhile looking at there. Okay, let me get back here. Oh, better turn off always on top, otherwise. So it'll show you there. Again, we talked about if you're exceeding like the memory, buy more memory. That's the easiest thing to do. Tells you the slots, CPU, the disk. To get detail now, we can click on another tab in there called the Process tab. And the Process tab in Task Manager will show us all the applications that are running and the processes that are running. And it also shows us for each of those the CPU that's being used, the memory, the disk, and the network that's being used. So it's if you see that there's a problem with memory or with the disk being consumed, you can, let's go back to Task Manager here. So if I go back to Task Manager here and bring up the processes here, then this is showing me if I want to see who's consuming, which of these applications or processes is using the most CPU, I can click on any of these headings and it'll sort it by that. So the one that's using the most, in this case, iSpring Free Camera, is using 7% of my CPU. And that's the software that is actually doing the recording of my screen right now. And that makes sense that it's using CPU. It's also using disk because it's having to write the information out to disk there and that. And it's using a nice chunk of memory there. So you can pull this up at any time and start drilling down into it to see what applications are using resources on your computer there. And some of these are going to be applications, some of them are processes. The processes may have been started from applications that you're running, or they may be Windows processes, or here's Norton Antivirus, here's Task Manager, here's some HP things, and you can see in my case, I think there's close to 60 or 70 processes that are running there. So even though I only have 2 applications, you know, if we go back to our viewer details, I've only got Chrome and PowerPoint running. Well, not in reality. I've got all this other stuff running on the computer, and they're all taking up CPU, they're all taking up memory, they're all taking up disk, they're all taking up potentially network there.
How do you know if you got something on your computer that shouldn't be on there?
Yeah, let's go back here, and hopefully I'll address it. If I don't address it, bring it up there. But when you start looking at things like this, you can end tasks and see if everything's still working the way that you want it to work, and that's kind of dangerous. But you are going to have a ton of tasks and a ton of processes running at any particular time. You can look up some of these processes and services and things like that by either Googling them or looking them up there to see. And one of the ways, let's go back here. So see if I pick any, let's pick service host web proxy. So I right mouse clicked on it. I could end that task. I could also individually look at stuff, but you'll see there's an option in here called search online. So if I click on the search online, what it does is it goes out to the internet and does a Google search on that process. Now I can go through these and I can read what they do or if it's harmful or stuff like that, so you can get an idea of, well, can I get rid of this, or is this part of the operating system or part of what HP may have put on the machine? You can start determining some of that stuff. But I wouldn't start out saying, I'm going to start going through here and deleting everything. What you do, the way you can use this is if you start noticing that your machine is slow, you can go out here and you can see what's consuming a lot of CPU, or what's consuming a lot of memory, or what's consuming a lot of disk, and then you can say, should that be doing it or not? Maybe I don't need that application. Maybe I don't want that option on there. That's the way that you can kind of use this to determine what's going on.
But when you delete it, it's gone at that time, but it'll come back when you turn the computer back.
Yes.
Task.
Yeah, this isn't deleting anything on the hard drive or in the startup, if this was started in the startup or that. It's just taking it out of memory, and so it's not currently running. The next time you start the machine, it may be running, or if you click on the icon again and start it up, things will start up there. And for that matter, if you delete one of these services, a fraction of a second later, another service may try and call that service, and it isn't out there, so then it starts up the service. So just because you got rid of it doesn't mean it's going to stay out of there for any. It can start up almost immediately there. So if I delete some stuff, let's say that Norton has out there, because Norton, just the viruses in general, have lots of services and lots of little programs running. If you start deleting some of those, they'll start popping back up and back on, because it needs that to do its service there. Okay. So you are going to have a lot of processes and that out there. And again, if you just concentrate on the ones that are causing problems, or you notice that your machine is slow and the disk light is constantly being on or flashing or stuff like that, and you go, I'm not really not doing anything. Why is it on? Well, you can go into Task Manager. You can see what applications or what services are actually doing stuff on the disk. And then start tracing things down there to say, oh, if you don't know that this is tied to the Microsoft indexing service, well, do you want indexing on or off? Can you turn it off? Or it's tied to iTunes scanning your files, that kind of thing. You can decide then. Many programs, utilities, and devices install processes that run when your PC starts. This can cause longer startup, memory usage, and other problems. So in Task Manager that we were just in, there's a tab for the Startup tab. And this is going to list some things that are out there. And this also gets back to, you can look at the names. There are sites out there, like this site will list what some of the various services and processes are doing. Or you can just Google, or so you can get the information in a couple of different ways. Like Paul was talking about, disabling a program in the startup or stopping it, ending the task, isn't going to delete any files from your hard drive. It's just, in the case of the startup folder, it won't attempt to run that when it starts. And if you do see that you have a problem or something isn't working right, you can always go back and enable it to start it back up there. And just because you disabled it doesn't mean that it's going to stay disabled. Because, like I say, some of the applications or that will automatically go back. If you disable something in the startup, and the next time you start, let's say LastPass will say, "Doggone it, I'm going to add a new entry in the startup to start its service that LastPass wants." So some of them will just go back and either turn it back on or create a whole new task in there to start it up. And similar to the startup, there's another tab in the Task Manager called Services, and that will show. So this is what the startup tab looks like. It lists a number of applications and things that get run. So you can see there's quite a few things in my startup, and this is a relatively clean machine. You're going to find that you may have double or triple what this has on here. And services, again, services, you may have 60, 70, 100 services running at any particular time. Some of them from Microsoft, some of them from all different software that you've put in at any time there.
And on your example startup, you use the one that disabled, like you don't use iCloud, so you disabled it, just came in with iTunes or something. So.
Right. So, but you can see here, LastPass installer, I disabled it, and LastPass went back in and added a new entry and did it. And Windows is trying to give you an indication of, well, which ones of these are really slowing down your machine. So it'll give you a startup impact and that. And you can see, well, Amazon Music Helper is slowing down mine, and LastPass installer and Screen Presso. And so, if you're looking to disable stuff or test it out, focus on the stuff that's high consumption, and the stuff that's slow or stuff like that are causing minimal problems, address that later or not at all there. Okay. Any questions on Task Manager? We kind of went through a lot of the different tabs there, and it's best if you just kind of play around with it, and that you'll see that there's a lot of detail in there that you have access to, and let me go back to Task Manager. So when we're in looking at some of these things too, let's go back to the performance. You'll notice that there's links down here in some cases for Open Resource Monitor. Well, Resource Monitor will give you even more detail. So this will show this can show individually what's going on. If I go to the CPU, it can show each CPU separate. So I have 4 virtual CPUs. It can show the 4 virtual CPUs separately and see which one is going and what tasks are running on which CPU. So there's a lot of detail that you can get. Same is true when I'm in the services. There's a link here called Open Services, and the services here will give you even more detail on the services. Now this is kind of handy in that this gives you a little description of if there's a description available for what this service is doing, you can read the description over here and then decide if you want to stop it and try things. So there's all kinds of options that you can do there. But start out in the task manager and that'll give you the most control there. Okay. Okay, now we'll talk about some things that you can do to kind of speed up your machine or clean up the machine. And one of the things that you can do is disk cleanup. And there's a tool from Microsoft. It's called the Microsoft Disk Cleanup. It helps you free up space on your hard drive to improve performance of the computer. The tool identifies files that can be safely deleted and lets you choose whether you want to delete some or all of the files. You'd use it because you want to remove temporary internet files that the Microsoft Edge browser or the IE browser may have put out there. It lets you download programs. So as Windows is doing its updates and some of the things it's downloading programs, it doesn't necessarily delete those programs. So this is an option to delete it. Recycle bin. Whenever you delete things, it really doesn't delete them. It just sticks them in the recycle bin. So if you truly know that you don't need some of these files anymore, you can empty the recycle bin. And to remove temporary files such as error reports and logs and that may have gotten created. I recommend that most people run this utility once a month. You can find this utility in the Start menu, and then there's an entry in there called Windows Administrative Tools, and then Disk Cleanup. Let's take a quick look at that. So if we go, let's go down here. Let's hide this. So if we go down here and look in the Start menu, and my guess is a lot of people haven't even looked at this. How many people are familiar with the Windows Administrative Tools? Or okay, a few anyway. This is what the Administrative Tools has. You have a ton of tools, and we're just talking about a few of these tools today, but there are a lot more tools that come with Windows here. And the tool that we're talking about is this Disk Cleanup. And we'll also talk about defragging and optimizing, and then we'll also talk about Task Scheduler. But there's these other tools that are also in here, and you can go into them at any time and check them out and use them and do it. If we go to the Disk Cleanup, it'll ask us which disk drive do we want to work on, and then this is where it'll give us a list of potential areas that we can delete files. And it's also giving us an estimate of the number of bytes that would be freed up if we deleted everything there. So you can pick and choose, and as you choose things, I can get a little description of what's being done there, what files are being deleted, so you can make good decisions there. But you can pick and choose whatever you want, and then you can clean the files. There's also an option to view files if you do want to view, but again, Windows has determined that these are directories and files that you don't need anymore, and they're safe to delete there. So let's go back. to run it, it usually takes 3 to 10 minutes, unless you've really got a lot of files. If you haven't done it in years, you may have a lot of files, so it could take longer, but it usually doesn't take that long to run. Also, I mentioned in the administrative tools, the Windows administration tools, is a program called Task Scheduler. Task Scheduler lets you schedule programs. So I mentioned this should be run once a month. Well, you don't have to put an entry on your calendar or post it up on your computer. You could just add it to the task scheduler to run it the 1st of every month or the 5th of every month. And if you want it to run at 3 in the morning, you can run it at 3 in the morning if your computer's on. You can schedule it. And so the scheduler is really nice there. I mentioned here if you use other internet browsers like Chrome or Firefox, the disk cleanup is not cleaning up files, temporary internet files that it creates. So the best way to clean those up is to go into Chrome or Firefox, and within their options, you'll see an option there to clean up temporary files. I mentioned here that the Norton System Suite, and there are other ones that also do tune-ups. These tune-ups frequently do run the Windows cleanup, and also we'll be talking about the Windows defrag there. But they're in the background running these same tools. So you running them or setting them up in the schedule, you can set them up any way that you want to have it do its thing. This is an example there of what the settings look like. Okay, another thing you want to do on your computer is to detect and repair disk errors, because your hard drive can develop bad sectors on it, a bad directory with entries in it. And so whenever a program crashes or you experience some power outage or your computer creates errors on the hard drive, it can leave open files and create bad areas there. Or even if I dropped my laptop and the head of the hard drive bounced on there, it can do damage to the hard drive, and those could be bad sectors out there. Errors will slow down your hard disk performance and sometimes make writing data difficult or even impossible there. This Microsoft Error Checking utility scans the hard drive for bad sectors and other errors. I recommend that most people run this every 3 months. You don't have to run it every month because it doesn't happen that often and stuff like that, but you can run it about every 3 months. To run it, yes, Jim.
This is only if you have a physical hard drive. If you have an SSD, it doesn't apply.
Yes, and I do mention that in a couple of bullets here, and we'll talk about that a little bit then. But to run this, start up your file manager. You can pick your drive that you want and then select Properties. And in the Properties box, you can click the Tools, then click the Check button. And the error checking dialog box will show, and it'll tell you if it's logged any errors. If there's no errors or that, you can still click on Scan Drive and it'll go through. And it sounds like a bunch of steps, but it really isn't. This is the Properties dialog. You click on the check. Up here, it tells you if it has been monitoring any errors on that drive. So on the C drive, it's telling me, I really haven't found any errors on the C drive, and all the requests that I haven't found any errors. But if you want, you can run the Scan Drive, and the Scan Drive is kind of a deep dive, go through every file and every allocation on that drive and make sure that it's correct and that the area is readable there. And so if you do choose that, it can go through then, scan the whole drive, and fix any problems that it may run into. Yeah, let me go back here. So if I bring up the Windows Explorer and I can use the Windows key, E, this brings up File Manager. I can go to C drive here, right mouse click, go to Properties. Within the Properties here, this is the properties for the C drive. You see here's a link to that disk cleanup. So this is another way to run the disk cleanup. I could go here and I could do the disk cleanup. But I can go to Tools, check the hard drive, and so this is where you can scan the drive there. You'll also see here's the optimize and defrag that we'll be talking about in another minute here. Defragging your hard drive. When you write a file to a hard drive, it's written in a number of small, usually 4K files in the first available free spot on your drive. What that means is if you have a large file, a 10 megabit file, let's say it's a picture there, it's written in 2,500 slots on your hard drive. So whenever you read or have to open up that file, it has to go to the first spot sends it to the second spot sends it to the third spot sends it to the fourth spot, 2,500 times. It goes pretty doggone fast, but it goes faster if all of these slots are one right after another, because the head of the hard drive can just go bang, 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 go along. If it has to go from here back over here, because the head is physically a little arm there, and it has to move in and out and wait for the disk to spin around to the right area of the drive, if they aren't continuous there, it's going all over. And if you think about it having to do that 2,500 times there, that can be slow opening up your file. And that works for programs the same as it does for data. So if your programs, when it wrote out the executable and you click to run that executable, if it has to go out there and get it from all over the place, it's slow doing that when it's non-contiguous. As files are deleted, files are moved, files are updated. So you installed everything initially on the machine, but now you got an upgrade to your software, and the executable is just a little bit bigger than the old one. Well, it has to write all that out there. And guess what? It can't write it in the same spot as the original. So some of it will be here, and some of it will be here, and some of it will be here, and some of it will be here. So they end up getting split all over the place. The more you use the PC, the more fragmented your programs and data get, and the longer it takes to find and use what you're looking for. This is a utility that should be run about every 3 months. Run it after you do your disk cleanup and repair on the hard drive. You can find it in the Start menu under Window Administration, Defragment, and Optimize Drives. It can take an hour or more to run, or if you've never done it and it's really defragmented, it may take all night to completely rewrite the stuff, because it has to read all this stuff and then rewrite it out to the hard drive in sequential order there. And this is what Jim was mentioning. Defrag does not have to be done for solid-state drives. So some of the newer laptops, you don't have a physical hard drive. They just have like flash memory that you're plugging in. That's the memory there. It's not a physical hard drive. Because again, this problem is slowed down because the head of the hard drive has to move and be repositioned to read the next thing. Well, on a solid-state drive, you don't have a physical head, so you don't have the same problem that you have. But for all the hard drives that do have a physical head, that's where you want to make sure that you are defragging and getting this stuff fixed there. Okay? Yep.
I've been using the Petroform defrag program for a while. I'm trying to figure out what's adding to my hard drive. I think I talked to you about it last month. That my hard drive, what's on it, goes up by large amounts, and I can't figure out what's doing it. And so I've been, the last few days, I've been defragging every night. And then when I made a spreadsheet, and last night I had 680 gigabytes on it when I ran to defrag, and this morning I turned it on and I disconnected from the internet during the night. It's got 3 gigabytes more on it after on defrag during the night.
That, yeah, I guess a couple of things. We'll start out with the defrag. Defragging a hard drive does not make more storage or less storage. It's just getting stuff in order. So if I take a drive that's completely mixed up and defrag it, I'm not going to gain any extra gigabytes or lose any for that matter. It's a one-for-one. It's just moving stuff right after each other. What may be going on is maybe some type of backup program is running that's, because you take a package like even a Quicken or that, each time you open it up, it'll create a backup, and so some programs are creating backups, or even if you were using like a Coban backup or things like that, you can back it up to the same hard drive, compress it, and back up these files and put it in a separate file there. It must be something like that, because defrag, I don't know of any defragger, whether it's Microsoft or anybody else's, that adds or takes up more space. They don't have to. They're just moving stuff around.
A log file, but it wouldn't be that big.
Yeah.
I did just clean it first?
No, I did not do it.
Just clean it.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be like Jim mentioned, maybe a log file, because some systems will just tack onto the end of a log file, and the log files over the course of years can get large, very large there. That it may be a case of there's some file out there, and it's creating that every night or that. Okay.
I haven't been looking at the scheduler, so I'll look at that.
Okay. Viruses, we covered viruses in February 2015. Make sure you have an antivirus and scan. Make sure you got definitions and versions. The important thing here is have only one antivirus running on your PC. I've seen people with 2 or 3 antivirus systems running on their PC, because when you bought the PC, it may have come installed with a particular version of Norton. Well, then they put McAfee on, and then they find out that Comcast has a free version of Norton, and they put that on. And if you haven't installed the previous versions, you've got 3 versions of an antivirus running on there, all trying to scan your files and monitor what's going on, and that really just slows things down. So make sure you don't have multiple versions, and that's where using Task Manager, you can see what's running. And if you see stuff like, gee, I should only be running Norton this particular version, and you start seeing McAfee stuff, or you start seeing Windows Defender, you shouldn't have that stuff running.
There's some websites that you go out to where they won't install like McAfee. They'll give you some bullet point, and then you just say yes, because I want to look at the website. You'll install McAfee on your computer.
Right. You may have gotten it by installing software or just saying yes, or it may have come on your machine, because certainly there's a lot of crapware when you buy a PC that they've installed that you get 90 days free or 6 months free of stuff and things like that. So
Particularly if Norton, if you want to get rid of it, you have to go out and get the Norton uninstaller. You just can't uninstall Norton because it'll leave a bunch of crap which will screw up your program even worse than running Norton itself.
yeah.
What's your opinion on the controversy now with Kreuzer being a Russian?
That I don't. I for the average person, I don't see it affecting them in terms of the Russian government isn't interested in shutting down your computer or controlling your computer. No,
You could get that free too.
But I mean, you could have that with any software. It doesn't have to be Russian software.
Well, I just find it interesting that was the one that Best Buy was pushing and installing on machines. They suddenly said we will no longer support it or install it. because it's Russian.
Yeah.
It seemed to be one of the better
Oh, yeah.
antivirus programs.
Yeah, and if you, I guess in terms of antivirus, what I've recommended in the past is if you have Comcast, you can install the Norton. There's a version of the Norton suite that you can install free of charge. Don't have to pay yearly. And if you have CenturyLink, same thing there. There's a version of the Norton Web security suite you can install for free. So I'd recommend those. You shouldn't have to pay any money for a good antivirus program if you have Comcast or CenturyLink there.
I have CenturyLink, and I still buy Norton.
You can. I mean, that certainly Norton has a few other things in some of their suites, but the basics in terms of antivirus and stuff like that, you're getting that with these versions from a CenturyLink and a Comcast. But before you install it, like Jim was talking about, you want to uninstall anything that you have, because if you don't do that and just install this new CenturyLink one over the top there, you've got both of them, and frequently that causes problems because both of them are scanning and both of them are running, and you've got all these processes.
You'll get really weird results, which you'll have no idea why they're doing things.
Okay, we're almost done. We'll zip through some of this. Remove.
When you update Windows, does it force you back to Defender?
No. A good software program, when it installs, will turn off Defender. The files for Defender will get updated, but it's not turned on to be loaded and running.
And all you do is just look, as Tom said, just look at the task manager.
And you shouldn't see it in there. Yeah. Okay, some of the other things you can do is remove unused programs. So this, most of us should be a little more familiar with. If you go to the settings apps, you'll get a list of software that you have installed. Not all software puts entries in here, but most of the software is in here. And you can uninstall software from here. So if you found that a couple of years ago, you were using a particular software package and you haven't since, uninstall it. Less software you have, faster your machine's going to be, less problems you're going to have. Disable indexing. So by default on your hard drive, Microsoft turns on indexing, which can make the search faster. So if I go to Explorer here and go up here and this quick search here, well, if I type a word in here, it's going through its database, and the database is a database that it created, going through all of my files, reading all of the information in those files, and building this database. Well, that takes a lot of time and effort to build that database, and every time you update a file or change a file, it has to redo that in the database. So turning off indexing is, and the minute you start copying a bunch of files from a flash drive or from another drive back and forth, the drives are going through indexing. So you can turn off the indexing, and it's really not going to affect your, I mean, it's going to make your machine faster, but most people aren't using that search to search inside the files anyway. Could be.
He deletes the index and he creates the index right after. He still stays all that data.
When you see the light flashing and your disk access being up, that's where you can trace it down, because you will see an entry in Task Manager that will say Microsoft Indexing Services. And so, you know, if that's using a lot of CPU and that's using a lot of disk, but you can turn it off. I turn it off on all my drives. Even when I was at 3M here, I turn it off on all my machines because it's just extra overhead I don't need there. And this just tells you how you can uncheck it there. The other thing I'll mention is there's lots of programs that also scan your hard drive. So programs like Picasa, iTunes, CloudSync, a Windows Media Player, antivirus, spyware, Windows Update, notifications, and others are constantly scanning your hard drive and doing things there. What you want to do there is turn it off for the directories and drives that you don't need scanned. So like in the case of Picasa or iTunes or things like that, narrow it down to just exactly what you want scanned there, and that'll improve your performance. The other thing is if you can leave your desktop PC on, then some of this scanning is going to happen at night or during times there. Because if you turn your PC off all the time, then that just means that whenever you do turn it on and log on, you may have hundreds of scans and tasks that are taking place before your machine is caught up there, and so it just makes it faster there. And you can use the task manager to check and see what programs are hogging the disk there to see if you do have a problem. This we mentioned Task Scheduler, where you'd go in and put in your disk cleanup and stuff like that. Well, what's probably surprises a lot of people is if you go into Task Scheduler, you will see that you already have almost 100 tasks already set up in there. When you install Windows and have put a couple of pieces of software on, you've got almost 100 tasks set up in there. And let's go quickly, if I can go here. I think we got it. So we'll go to Task Scheduler. That's down in the Windows Administrative Tools. And there's Task Scheduler. Let's make this, and this gives you a little overview of what it is. But what this is telling me is active tasks. I have 93 active tasks on my machine, and it lists some here, but I can actually get more detail. The tasks can be put into folders and a whole directory to organize them. And so Hewlett-Packard put a bunch, Microsoft put a bunch, Norton put a bunch, and something for remediation put a bunch. But let's just pull up, let's go back here. So let's just take this as an example. This is at the root here. These are tasks that have been set up. Here's a Google Update task. It's going to run at 8:18 p.m. every day. After it's triggered, it's going to repeat every hour for the duration of one day, which means that it's basically running every hour of every day. And what you'll find is, again, you've got hundreds of these tasks, some of them calling other tasks, and they're triggered off of any time a user logs on, custom event, time comes up. You have all these, anytime a file is changed, you have events being triggered, services being run, and these things are going to take up resources on your machine there. And you can go in here for any of these. I can disable it, I can delete it, you can create new ones, so you can do practically anything there. But tasks can be causing all kinds of problems on your machine. Browsers, just like the startup, browsers have add-ins, and you may have a number of add-ins in there. You kind of have to check that. Some of the more common add-ins are antivirus and URL checking to make sure that it's a valid site. Well, there's no such thing as for free, so if it's monitoring every keystroke as you move across the page, it's going to slow things down there. This is an example in Google Chrome. If you go to the three dots there and look under More Tools, Extensions, it'll list the extensions that you have installed. And just like with the startup, you can enable or disable them. Like in my case, I have AdBlock and I have LastPass. So the LastPassword, like Jim was talking about, if you have some of those are add-ins, and those are have to be loaded when the browser loads and are running in the background whenever you're doing things. So if you're not happy with your performance, you can experiment with turning certain ones off and see what happens. So like back here, I've turned off Google Docs and Google Docs offline. I've turned off a number of add-ins to speed things up there. If all else fails, one of your options is to kind of completely start from scratch from when you got your new machine and reinstall the operating system, because usually you do have the operating system on here. I could reinstall and do that. It'll clean up years of programs that you no longer use or versions that may have been updated or changed. Only attempt it if things are really bad and you have lots of time, because if you think it's going to take you a couple hours, probably think of it as more of a week or 2 weeks to get things back and running there. It's there's no such thing as, well, I'm just going to install this and everything's going to work. You forget about installing this and you forget about that, and you have to copy these files, so it all takes time there. There are tips out on the internet if you are going to wipe your drive. Make sure you back up all your data so that you don't lose any of that. I mentioned in here a couple of links that you can go out to. There's optimization software. So this is a list of some free optimization software that you can take a look at if you want. And then there's purchase packages that you can purchase. I list that there. But personally, myself, I find using the Windows utilities, I can do everything that I need to do there. Question? Yes.
What do you think about just going into like startup and just taking out everything and just let anything come back that is needed?
Deleting everything and then getting it back. I in my earlier days, I used to do more things like that. The trouble is, I don't use all my software and all my things. Let's say in a week's time, do I use all the software? No. Some stuff I maybe only use once a quarter. I have a calendar program, and I have this, and I have.
Won't it come back?
Well, usually what happens there is if it doesn't have it, some of the software is smart enough to prompt. Some of it just plain doesn't work.
Oh.
And then you have to reinstall it. You may have to go back through the installation and install it. Well, even the startup, because if some of the services aren't running, some of the packages aren't smart enough to know that, well, it just maybe was turned off. The more commercial stuff, no problem with most of that stuff, or it'll add back in an entry like LastPass or stuff like that.
It should be selected.
Right. And concentrate on the things that are causing the most problems. So if something is, really causing a problem, people will say, well, I want my machine to start up faster. Well, like this laptop, I rarely shut it down. I put it to sleep when I move it, and I turn the power here, but it's not down. So when I go anywhere and push the power, it's instantly up there. Now it's using some battery, so I couldn't leave it unplugged forever, but that kind of gets around some of the startup and some of the issues there too. Yeah.
I think you had another presentation a year or two ago about Windows 10, things you should do, like when you get a new Windows 10 PC. That kind of talking about slightly different things, though.
Yeah, the what you should do when you get a new PC or changes that you should make. Some of those have to do with aesthetics and how things look and act and stuff like that. This is a little different slant.
That Microsoft and Windows 10 is doing a lot more scanning. Sending data back to the corporate.
Yes, there's certainly some key logging, and by default it being turned on and things like that. So yes, there's certainly some things there that can be turned off or done there. and hopefully, using Task Manager now, you should be able to determine what's causing the problem, whether it's a slow disk or memory or things like that. Okay.
You also had about removing.
Thank you.
Appreciate this one. When you get, that was all, it also talked about removing the crapware that often